All right, today we're diving into one of the most intense and honestly challenging stories ever told, the Book of Job. It's this incredible ancient poem that really makes you grapple with some of the biggest questions out there: suffering, faith, who God is. So let's get right into it. At the very core of this story is a question that I think every single one of us has asked at some point. Why? Why do bad things happen to good people? It's a question that's been around forever, right? But the story of Job, well, it puts that question under a microscope like nothing else.
So first up, a wife in ruins. We start off by meeting this man, Job, who, he seems to have it all. The text says he's righteous, blameless, basically a really good guy who is blessed in just about every way you can imagine. But as you can probably guess, his world is about to be completely and brutally dismantled.
And the thing that's so shocking is how fast it all happens. We're talking about a single day. This isn't some slow, gradual decline. No, it's an instant, catastrophic collapse. One messenger after another shows up, and each one brings news that's just more horrifying than the last.
Just look at the scale of this. His entire fortune, all his livestock, gone. His entire staff, all his servants, gone. And then, the absolute worst blow imaginable. All 10 of his kids. All of them. Lost. Just like that. It's just unimaginable.
So what does he do? How do you even react to that? Well, Job's response is, it's just astounding. He doesn't curse God, he doesn't shake his fist at the sky, he tears his clothes, shaves his head, signs of deep mourning, and then he falls to the ground and worships. Can you imagine that? It's just this incredible display of faith right in the middle of the worst pain you can think of.
And just when you think it can't possibly get any worse, it does. The suffering isn't over. This time, it gets physical. It gets personal. Job is hit with these awful, painful sores from the top of his head to the soles of his feet. He's left in constant agony, literally sitting in a pile of ashes, scraping his sores.
At this point, even his wife just can't take it anymore. She sees him there in all that misery and she hits her breaking point. She just says, "Curse God and die." You can feel the despair in that, right? Just give up, make it stop. But Job refuses. He actually asks her a question back. Should we only accept the good things from God and not the bad?
Okay, next section, the arrival of friends. This is where the story really pivots. We move from just this narrative of terrible loss into a really deep and honestly frustrating philosophical debate. See, Job isn't totally alone. 3 of his friends hear what's happened and they show up, supposedly, to comfort.
And what they do at first is actually perfect. It's maybe the most helpful thing they do in the whole story. The 3 of them, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, they just sit with him, in total silence, for 7 days and 7 nights. They just offer their presence, sharing in his grief without saying a word.
But once they start talking, everything changes. And this is where we see the central conflict of the entire book. See, Job's friends, they're working with this very simple, kind of rigid idea. God is good, God is just. So, if you're suffering this badly, you must have done something really wrong to deserve it. It's a neat little formula. But Job's reality? It just shatters that. He knows he's innocent. He knows he hasn't done anything to deserve this.
So, this brings us to the next phase. Job cries out for justice. What follows is this long, really beautiful and painful series of poems and speeches. And Job's focus shifts. He's not just defending himself against his friends anymore. No, he takes his case straight to the top. He starts demanding an audience with God himself. He wants to know why.
And his friends just keep piling on. Each one comes at him from a slightly different angle, but they all end up in the same place. You've got Eliphaz, who's like, well, in my experience. Then there's Bildad, who leans on tradition, saying, the old wisdom says, and Zophar is all about cold, hard logic. But none of it helps. Even if they mean well, all their arguments are just making things worse for Job. They're just piling on more pain.
And yet, and this is what's so incredible, right in the middle of all this pain and arguing, you get these stunning flashes of hope from Job. He's wishing for someone to plead his case, and then he makes this amazing declaration. He says he knows his Redeemer lives. He has this deep down faith that somehow, someday, he's going to be vindicated.
So after the first three friends finally go silent, this younger guy who's been listening the whole time, Elihu, he finally speaks up. And he's kind of frustrated with everybody. He calls out the friends for their bad advice, but he also challenges Job for being so self-righteous. And he offers a slightly more complex idea that maybe suffering isn't just a punishment, maybe it can teach us something or even protect us. His whole speech basically sets the stage for the climax of the story.
And here we go. Section 4, God Answers from the Whirlwind. This is it. This is the moment the whole book has been building up to. God finally shows up to answer Job, but it's not at all what you'd expect. There's no quiet, logical explanation. No, God speaks out of a massive storm, a whirlwind.
And get this, God never actually answers Job's question. He never explains why all this happened. Instead, God comes back with a whole bunch of questions of his own. He essentially takes Job on this mind-bending tour of the entire cosmos, asking, "Were you there when I did all this?" And the goal isn't to make Job feel small, it's to completely blow his perspective wide open.
And the questions just keep coming, one after another, each one bigger than the last. Hey Job, can you tell the sun when to rise? Do you have any clue how I designed a snowflake? Can you tell the stars where to go? And the obvious answer to all of them is, of course, no. It's this brilliant way of showing just how huge the gap is between our limited human understanding and God's infinite wisdom.
And in that moment, Job gets it. He is completely humbled. But it's not because God beat him in an argument. It's because he just got a tiny glimpse of who God really is. His response isn't shame or defeat, it's pure awe. He just gives up his need to have all the answers. He doesn't need the why anymore because he has seen God. All right, our last section, wisdom in the aftermath. So where does all this leave us? The story doesn't just end with Job sitting in the dirt. Things are restored. But how they're restored? Well, that's actually the key to understanding the whole point of the book.
So first, in a moment that must have felt like pure validation for Job, God turns to the three friends and basically tells them they were completely wrong about him. That's huge. And then, yes, all the stuff comes back. His wealth is doubled, he has a new family, more children. He ends up living a long and full life.
But, and this is the absolute most important takeaway, getting all his stuff back isn't the real point. This book isn't some cosmic formula that says if you suffer patiently, you'll get twice as much back. No way. The real restoration, the most important thing that happened, was back in that whirlwind. That's where Job went from just knowing about God to actually knowing God on a personal level.
So, let's wrap up with the big lessons here. What are we supposed to take away from this whole epic story? First, it completely demolishes that simple idea that suffering is always a punishment for sin. It's not. Second, it shows that God is in control, even when everything feels like it's spinning into chaos. And maybe most importantly, it teaches us that real faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting God's character even when you don't understand his plan.
When you really boil it down, Job's story shows us that in our suffering, God doesn't hand us a pamphlet with all the answers. He doesn't give us a simple formula to fix things. He offers something so much better, so much more profound. He offers himself. His presence is the answer, even when that presence shows up in a whirlwind.
I want to leave you with this one last powerful quote from Job, said right in the middle of his struggle. It's a line that perfectly captures this radical kind of faith, a faith that holds on tight, not because it understands everything, but because it knows who it's holding on to. And it kind of leaves us with a question to chew on, doesn't it? What would a faith like that actually look like in our own lives?
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us.